Good morning, Senior School. Good to see you. Good to hear from you. Good to see the work you've submitted. I'm going to go ahead and begin our music theory time for Tuesday. Okay, we're going to talk about a couple of different things today. Number one, we're going to talk about notation. Number two, pitch. 3, rhythm, some meter, scales, keys, and intervals. You're probably hearing that and thinking, wow, that's a lot. And yes, it is. But most of it is review for us. So let's go ahead without further ado and let's begin. This part of music is called the staff. The staff has 5 lines and 4 spaces. Okay, for our purposes, for this part of the lesson, we're going to use treble clef and 4/4 time signature. Most of you should have a perfect idea of what that means. Okay, so we're going to close this. We're going to close that. I don't need that. I'm a pro. All right, so we're going to go ahead and look at this. If I've got notes on the staff, I put them somewhere in the middle. How about line 3, perfectly in the middle? I get the note B in treble clef. If I put notes higher than that, I'm going to get a higher sound. If I put notes lower than that, I'm going to get a lower sound. The higher the note, the higher the sound. The lower the sound, the lower the note on the staff. Okay, pretty straightforward. These are called pitches. We have got 4 spaces and 5 lines. So here's all our line notes. Beautiful. Here's our space notes. As you can see, they fit nicely in between each other, and we have a wonderful staff filled with notes in all the right places. Here's one thing too, let's point out. We are going to go ahead and write out a C major scale. I'll go ahead and do that now. Okay, as you can see, I've got a C major scale. I can go back to the beginning of this scale using my arrow keys, or I can just click, and I'm going to push spacebar. Beautiful C major scale. Let's go ahead and take a look at how many notes there are. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Wonderful. 8 notes in a major scale. Every time that you get to your 8th note of a scale, you're going to go ahead and repeat whatever that first note was, which means that these notes have the same name, C and C. However, they are an octave in distance from each other. An octave. And we'll talk more about intervals at the very end of the video. But this is all you'll need to know for now about how the lines and the spaces and the staff works for putting down notes and reading them. This is the grand staff in music. In the grand staff, we have a treble clef and a bass clef. This is the type of thing a piano player would see. When they play music, left hand is all the bass clef, right hand is the treble clef, and these 2 staves are connected with a bracket. So what we're going to talk about is the difference between notes. We're going to talk about half steps and whole steps. On the top one, in the first 2 measures, I'm going to go ahead and recopy the treble clef C major scale, and then over here I'm going to go ahead and put the pitches that would be a half step and a whole step apart in a chromatic scale. I'm going to do both. I'm going to do it here on the treble clef, and I'm going to do the exact same thing on the bass clef. Okay, as you can see, I've written out 2 different scales. I've written a C major scale, and then starting in measure 3, I've written out a C chromatic scale. Let's go ahead and give a listen to these. As you can see, the pitches were the exact same pitch. They were just an octave apart. Okay, another thing I want to point out. This is the note C on the treble clef. This is the note C on the bass clef. These are different places. The bass clef has a different pitch system. We're going to talk about that maybe a little bit more, but what you need to know is this is C. Everything up to there is C. Now let's talk about half steps and whole steps. The relationship between every single one of these notes is a half step. So C to D flat, half step. D flat to D, half step. D to E flat, half step. All of those are half steps. Now, I wrote the flat versions, but down here I wrote the sharp version, so you can see that A sharp is the exact same thing as a B flat. They're the same sound. Okay? All those are the same sounds all the way up. They're just different based on the half step or whole step relationship and the way they're written. So, sharps and flats can mean the same thing. One more time, this is a D sharp, this is an E flat. They're the exact same note. E natural, F, F, F sharp, G flat, same note. Okay? Different name, same sound. The last thing I want to point out to you is this. Find on this staff and both staffs which 2 notes don't have an accidental in between them. Okay, so if we look here, we've got E and F. There is no accidental between them. E to F is a half step. Most notes are a whole step apart. They're natural sounds. So for example, C to D, that's normally a whole step. But there's a D sharp or a C sharp or a D flat in between that makes it two half steps. But C to D is a whole step. E to F is a half step, and the other one that's strange but is a half step is B to C. Those are also just a half step apart. There is no such thing as a B sharp or a C flat. A C flat is the exact same sound as a B. If I want to change this to C flat, I could push down, but it's just going to turn it into a B because the software knows that those are the same pitch. Okay? So make sure that you are double checking your notes when you're writing that we don't see B sharps or C flats or E sharps or F flats because they're not this. They are the exact same pitch, half step between. The way we calculate whole steps is we just count two notes. So C to D, whole step. D to E, whole step. E to G flat, whole step. Same thing if you look here. The reason we're skipping over that F because those are half step apart, remember. G flat to A flat, whole step. A flat to B flat, whole step. And then B flat to C, whole step. And the same applies down here. You could do the exact same thing. I'll go a little faster though. C to D, D to E, E to F sharp to G sharp to A sharp, and then A sharp to C. Half steps, and then whole steps every two. The reason this matters is because the order of whole steps and half steps determines what kind of scale we're playing. We're only going to talk about major scales today, but here's something you need to know about it. Here's a C major scale, and here's the order of whole steps. Whole step, D to E, whole step, E to F, half step, F to G, whole step, G to A, whole step, A to B, whole step, B to C, half step. So fast, that would be whole step, half, whole, half. That is the order we have for major scale, whole step, and half step. That determines whether or not it's going to be a major scale or a different kind of scale. But like I said, today we're just going to talk about major scales. So this knowledge is important because it can help us create major scales and play them accurately. The next thing that we're going to go into, though, is we are going to go ahead and talk about key signatures. Okay, here we are with some key signatures. The first one is going to be C major. Second is F major. Third, B flat major. Fourth, E flat major. And fifth, A flat major. These are all key signatures that you have seen and that you have played on before. I'm going to go ahead and explain why they're called what they're called, but to start, I'm going to go ahead and add in the first pitch of each one of these. So for C major, pretty obvious, we start on a C. This is F major, so we start on an F. B flat major, we start on a B flat. E flat major, we start on an E flat, and then A flat major, we start on an A flat. Now, composers use key signatures for two reasons. One, it organizes the music in a really nice way, and two, it makes it easier to play and write. So instead of having to throw in flats and accidentals all the time, they can just write the key signature, and that tells us that every note that's B and every note that's E is going to be a B flat or an E flat. So we can go ahead and write out the scale from here, and all we have to do is just make sure that we keep going in the upwards direction with our notes. So I'm going to go ahead and do that as well, but let's do the first one together. So we know it's C major, so C, D, E, F, G, A, B, C. We can play that. Major scale. We can do the same for F. We'll go ahead and do that together as well, and then I'll do the last ones on my own. Okay, go ahead and click back on F, and we can play it. Now we have two major scales, C major, F major. I'll do the other three for you so you can see what I'm talking about. There you go, and I wrote them all out, and all I had to do was do one line in space at a time, and I wrote out the scale. Just wrote down the key signature, and then on MuseScore, you can use the playback feature to listen to it. There you have it. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 major scales. Now, how do we know the names of those scales? Well, the one obvious way to know it is the name of a major scale is going to be the exact same thing as the first note in the scale. So C, F, B flat, E flat, A flat. Easy. But what if we're given just the key signature and we need to know what scale it is? Well, the easy way to do that is to look at the second to last flat sign, and that tells us the name of the scale. Now, there are two scales you just have to memorize. You have to memorize C because there's nothing there, and F you have to memorize because there's no second to last. Okay? So you just have to know that one flat is F major, No flats and no sharps is C major. Now B flat, you can find the second to last one. E flat, B flat, that tells us that this is the key of B flat. B, E, A, second to last, E flat major. B, E, A, D, second to last, A flat, tells us that's A flat major. So that's the quick and dirty kind of way to understand how keys work. We will talk more about them later when it comes time to use them, but just understand that that is how we can determine the name of the key signature. The last thing I want to mention about scales, though, is scale degrees. Now, every scale has 8 notes in it, and each of those notes is counted 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So, for example, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. You can do that for all the scales. Okay. Now, one thing you might be asked is, tell me the 7th scale degree of blank key. So, for example, I might say, tell me the name of the note that is the 7th scale degree for the key of C. Well, you can write out the scale and then count to 7. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. B. B is the 7th scale degree of the C scale. Okay, the other thing I could say is, give me the 5th scale degree of E flat. Well, you find the key of E flat, count 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. B flat. That's the 5th scale degree of E flat. One more example. Let's say I want to know the 3rd scale degree of A flat. Well, find the A flat key and then count to 3. 1, 2, 3. C. C is this 3rd scale degree of the key of A flat. So that's the easy way to understand scale degrees, and those will come into play later when we figure out intervals and determine what notes go well with each other. Okay, one more thing about pitch that I want to talk about before we move on, and that is intervals. Intervals are the distance between 2 tones. Okay, the number of letter names. So for example, if I have a quarter note, I have a C, and I have a note this far above it, I count the letter names. 1, C, D, 2, E, 3, F, 4, G, 5, A, 6. Or in simple terms, I just count the spaces in lines 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. That tells me that C and A are a 6th apart from each other. And here's what that sounds like. It's a major sound. Okay, so that tells me that one piece of information, that these 2 notes are a 6th apart. Now I'm going to go ahead and write out a C major scale, and we are going to look at the different intervals that exist on that scale. Alright, you can see that we've got our C major scale. Go ahead and play that for you to prove that I know what I'm talking about. Beautiful major scale. Now in all of these there exists intervals, and I showed you how to count them already, but I'm going to go ahead and now what I'm going to do is I'm going to write a C underneath all of these notes. Okay, let's go ahead and listen to those. All of those are considered a major interval or a perfect interval in a major key. So let's go ahead and count those again. This is called unison, when it's the same note in the same spot. It's just one note playing the same pitch. That's unison. This one is going to be called a major second. 1, 2, C to D, second. C to E, major third. C to F, perfect fourth. Notice I used a different word there, not major, perfect. I'll talk about that in a minute. C to G, perfect fifth. C to A, major sixth. C to B, major seventh. C to C is called an octave. We talked about that. Same pitch, just different register, higher and lower than each other. Okay, so let's go ahead and listen to each of these one at a time. This is unison. We know this. Easy. This is C and D together. This is a major second. A little more of a clashing sound because the pitches are so close to each other. C to E, this is a major third. Very happy sound. Okay, major. Next one we're going to listen to is C and F. This is a perfect fourth. Now listen to this sound and try to figure out what you think it might be. Let's do that again. Perfect fourths are interesting because they're neither major nor minor. They're what we call a perfect interval. They're a great distance apart. They're very, very pleasant to the ear, but they're not major. Same thing happens with a perfect fifth. Okay, it's called a perfect fifth. Neither major nor minor. Next we have C to A. We talked about this. This is a sixth. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. That is also a major interval. Major. Happy sounding. C to B, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Also major, but listen to that quality again, to that sound. That's a sound of something that's trying to go somewhere. You can hear it. It needs to be resolved. If I were to leave it alone, okay, and played from here maybe, listen to this last interval. It's unfinished, right? We want it to go somewhere, and that place we want it to go is right here. It's a satisfying sound, okay? Yeah, very nice to hear. So this octave is the other one we talked about. So we have unison, second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh, and an octave, 8. Technically, you could call it an eighth, but that's not exactly accurate. Just call it an octave. Okay, so this is the quick and dirty information you need to know about intervals. Remember that intervals are always stacked on top of each other. For example, this, that's not a second, okay? Because they follow each other. That's just neighboring tones, okay? An interval only exists when the notes are on top of each other. Okay, so this, that's an interval because you hear both at the same time. Okay, this is actually what we call a melodic interval, meaning the interval occurs, but it happens one note after the other. And a harmonic interval is this, when the notes are stacked on top of each other. You don't really need to worry about it too much, but we are going to be using intervals later, so it's important to understand if I ask you to write a major third, I want you to be able to do that. Okay, the last thing we're going to talk about today, and we're going to go really fast, is we're going to talk about rhythm and time signatures. Okay, here we are with time signatures. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 different time signatures in front of us right here. 4 of them share the same bottom number, but none of them share the same top number. So let's talk about that. We all know that 4/4 is a very common time. There's 4 beats in a measure, and quarter notes always get the beat. So how do we know that? Well, first, the bottom note tells us what kind of note gets the beat, which in this case is a quarter note. The top note tells us how many beats there are in a measure, so there's going to be 4. And we can translate all that information to these 3 time signatures as well. 4 quarter notes are going to get the beat, 3 beats in a measure, 2 beats in a measure, 5 beats in a measure. So let's just prove that right now. Got my quarter note. I can only fit 3 in there. I can fit only 2. I can fit all the way up to 5. Now we have seen this key signature before. We saw that with Mission Impossible a couple years back. So it definitely does exist. Okay, so we've got all those time signatures in there. Oh, but what about 4/4/4? Well, 4/4 can hold 4 in it. You've seen that a lot. But what I have before that is I have a pickup measure. This is called a pickup measure, which is kind of like a diving board into the song. It's going to lead us into the first phrase. And this pickup measure also has a fancy Latin name called anacrusis. Anacrusis, which is a bizarre name, but it is the same thing as a pickup measure. It's the actual, I guess you could call it the scientific name for a pickup measure is anacrusis. Now I've got a half rest in here, which means I can fit 2 beats into it. So I have a 2-beat pickup measure, which leads into my first measure, 4/4, then 3/4, then 2, 2/4, and let's see what this sounds like. The time's weird because the time signatures are hopping around all over the place. So it sounds kind of bizarre. But just so you know, that is how many you can fit in each measure. Now this time signature, this is the strange one. Okay? We're only going to briefly mention it because these time signatures here, these are all simple meter time signatures, meaning that they're very simple. They use 4, the bottom number is divisible by 2. So these are simple meters. On top, though, they are different in that way. This is a duple meter because 4 is divisible by 2, 2 is divisible by 2, and 3 is called triple meter because it's divisible by 3. So we have a triple meter measure, duple, and then 5/4 is just kind of a complex, simple measure, which is weird because there's a 5 on top, which isn't divisible by 4 or 2, or 3. So it's its own type of thing. 6/8, on the other hand, is called compound meter, meaning that dotted quarter notes get the beat. Now this is the weird thing. Okay, I can fit 2 dotted. Sorry, that is in a weird spot. Let's go ahead and undo that. Should have put it right here. I can fit 2 dotted quarter notes in there. Okay, which means that each dotted quarter note is containing 3 eighth notes. So 3 plus 3 is 6. And if 8 stood for eighth notes, you could make an argument that there's 6 eighth notes in a measure of 6/8. But a better way to think about it is actually to think about it in groups of 3. Okay, so now I've got 3 there, and I've got 3. So instead of thinking it as dotted quarter notes, it's easier sometimes for our brains to think about it in groups of 6 eighth notes. And you can hear the tripletness to it. Triplet, triplet. And I can keep going and adding notes to that. Okay, but I didn't really want to talk about 6/8 too much, just wanted to show it to you. Now, really quick rhythm. Let's talk about that. We got quarter notes. Oops. An eighth note can fit into a quarter note. Okay, so if I want to add eighth notes, now I have 2. Easy. Half note takes up 2 quarter notes. Half note. Whole note takes up 4 quarter notes. And then a dotted half note takes up 3 quarter notes. So that's the basic gist of rhythm. We're not going to get into it any more than that, but I wanted you to see what that looks like. Okay, make sure to check ManageBack because you're going to have an assignment on this as well. You're going to be having a worksheet to fill out, and then I'm also going to post your practice log for today. So remember to look at that and start practicing. Everything is due Fridays. Okay, Friday night, everything is going to be due. I'm not even going to look at your assignments till then, so please post everything then. On Thursday is our first music history lecture. Get ready for that. It should be about a 15-minute video. I want you to listen and take notes because I'm going to be asking you questions at the end for you to respond to as well. And those questions will be due Friday. Okay, guys, I hope this makes sense. If it's confusing, send me a message. I'll try to answer as best I can. If not, be ready for the next video on Tuesday. Good luck, and thank you for listening.